Thank you so much for being here. What a special treat we have. Quickly, I want to thank the Holland Project and Radical Cat Books because supporting the appearance of our special guest, because it wouldn't have happened really without them. And I'm so happy to be standing here. My job in the library system means that I get to collaborate with an extremely talented team of librarians. And way back in February, I was so happy to have another one of my friends' forthcoming books in my hand. I loved it so much, I didn't want it to end. Author Fest was in the early planning stages, and it was the exact right time to ask Willy to headline. We're so excited. Anyway, he said yes, obviously. And the hard work began. Since then, he has been touring internationally for the horse and his beautiful band, the DeLines. Willy is a Reno native who's been writing stories and songs since he was 11. I remember in the early 90s, he was playing music all over town. Years later, he found himself in a long career with his Portland band, Richmond Fontaine, released 11 albums with them. Then came the inevitable success of getting his words published in the form of 7 critically acclaimed novels. 8 years ago today, Willy was inducted into the Nevada Writers Hall of Fame. I know. Impressive. For many years now, he has been living, teaching, and writing in Oregon. Today, he is going to share with us a few of the things he does best. Reading aloud from his work, playing the original music inspired by his work, and answering questions about the process of writing and publishing his work. I wrote a little story. Once upon a time, a public library was born in the middle of a big little city. The library wanted to be a park, so it grew trees and plants inside. Right? The library loved everyone and smiled each time it met someone new. One day a boy came to it, and the library knew they would become great friends. The boy spent much of his time with the library, and they got to know each other very well. The young man became a writer, and the library was proud. After he acquired his first guitar, his love for words grew alongside his talent for creating music. Stories became novels, and songs became soundtracks. The library had newspapers and magazines, so it knew what the man had been up to. The library heard people talking about how much they loved all the books he'd been writing. Someday, the library thought, he will return to me, and I will be happy to see him. And now, please help me welcome the pride of the Truckee Meadows, Willy Vlautin.
Thanks, Terry. It's crazy. I know there's a lot of writers here. I started writing songs because my brother said, my brother wrote songs as a kid, and he always wrote songs to get girls. And I remember hearing him because we lived in the basement of my mom's house, and I'd hear him practicing all week some girl's name and the song, and then he would, play her the song and then go back. My brother had a water bed with those 70s murals of trees, and a stereo that was so loud it could shake our house. And I told myself I guess I was 10 or 11, 12 then, and I said, man, I will never write songs to get girls. And I never did, which is one of the dumber things I ever did. But my brother said as a kid, he goes, you're such a sad kid, you should write songs about it. And I did everything my brother told me to do. And so I started writing songs, and I was so bad at it and so naturally ungifted musically, and you'll hear my voice soon, and that'll back it up. But that after a while you just get tired of bothering people with your bad music, because rock bands. I was like into like cow punk kind of stuff, like that. All you're doing is bothering people, and so one day I just started writing a story at the library, not this library, but a different library, and then I said, oh, you don't bother anybody, and you can just disappear from the world, and you're safe. And so I got it. That's how I started writing. It was just pure escapism and not wanting to bother anybody. I never planned on publishing books. I wrote from when I was 19. I even wrote like a novella where a guy gets. Shows you how young and dumb I was, really. I wrote a novella about a guy and this girl I had a crush on. We get stuck in this library. And because my big plans, if I ever hit it big, was to buy this library and live in it. Because I think it's the most beautiful place I think that's ever been in. It's the most beautiful place to me, this library. So we lived up top in that, like, where I would assume the boss lives or works. And I, being a kid of TV, I had a replicator where we had food, like in Star Trek. We had a hot tub, of course, So, but I wrote from 18 to 35, and I think I wrote 4 novels. I wrote a Harlequin romance once when I was going hard up. I wrote a lot of crazy stuff. And I'd written my first book, The Motel Life, but I'd never planned on publishing it because by that time I was in a touring band that didn't do very well. And I wrote all the songs, so I felt so responsible for our lack of success. And the guys in my band would even say, like, man, could you just, ease up on the story thing and write something catchy? And so I didn't want people to say I was bad at writing, and so I just never showed anybody. I had, like, one drinking buddy, I showed him my stuff. But I never really showed anybody outwardly my stuff. And then my band started doing better, and I started doing interviews with rock magazines, and a lot of those journalists were novelists. And I met this novelist who was interviewing me for this rock magazine, and he said, I bet you write novels, or you could. And I go, well, man, I do write them. And he said, well, I'm going to invite my agent to your gig tonight. And the agent was 25. She just started. She was drunk. And she says, and he introduced me, and the guy goes, he's going to send you his novel. And I go, I don't know. And then she goes, well, I'll read it, And so when I got off tour, I said, well, do you want to be a failure, the potential of being a failure, or your books could maybe be in a library next to all the other books someday. So you either take the chance. And so I just got lucky. She was smart. I still work with her 23 years later or whatever. Now, I mean, I met her. She just left home, and now she's got like 2 kids in college. But it was just luck. I just got lucky that way. I don't think I would ever had the guts to publish. I think it's really, it's hard to sell your stuff, and it's hard. Like, I'm okay with this sitting in a room by myself all day and beating my head against a wall. I'm a good boss, to myself. So I don't mind that, but it is hard. Once you write it, is when the real work starts of trying to get people to read it. And Jesus, that's a tough one. So I admire anybody that writes and tries to put their stuff out. But that's so. As there's a bunch of writers, I figured that's kind of how I started. And like my band said, when my first band, we started doing okay. We never did great, but when we started doing okay, the guitar player came to me and he said, man, I like the gigs we're playing. Let's not get kicked out of this party. Like, let's not screw up, and let's just play hard and put out as many records as we can before people realize that we're not good, And that's kind of what I did with books. When I sold The Motel Life, I called my agent a couple times, and I said, do you think the publisher's going to go broke by the time, because I'm starting to get excited now. I go, are they going to go broke before my book comes out? And she goes, no, I don't think they're going to go broke. It's going to be all right. And so I just said, well, I just don't want to get, once you get to write them, it's so fun. The work ethic of it is so fun. I didn't want it to end, so I'm kind of just a workhorse. So I just wait until somebody kicks me out, I'm going to play, and I think this will work. Let's see if we can do this right. I'm going to play the last song I wrote about Reno. And this is will set up my book. I got off the bus. A friend of mine said he'd pick me up, but he never showed up, so I made my own way. Little Mexico came into sight, where once were just small town streets, where once were just dying streets. Now the sprawl is never ending. Caught a girl I used to know, a nurse from St. Mary's. We had a place on 7th Street, but I left her in a rough way. Her dad said she got married, was living in Stockton with a baby. He said he couldn't remember me, but I knew he was lying. And the night scene never ended. Well, I woke up to see a policeman standing over me. I told him I grew up just down the street. He said he didn't care as long as I didn't block the stairs. Well, I sat in the movies, drank off a pint until I fell asleep, till a nervous 16-year-old kid was telling me I had to leave. Well, I know what you abandon dies, and I know what you leave leaves you too. And I know you can't go back if there's nothing to go back to. Well, I sat by the river. The sky was full of stars and the water was rustling. There were men camped across from me, and the night seemed never ending. Oh, the night was never ended. Well, I woke up to see a policeman standing over me. I told him I didn't mean to run out on everything. He said he didn't care as long as I didn't start camping there. Thank you. My latest book is the first book I wrote about music. I never wrote about music because I just never liked reading about rock musicians. Like rock star novels, I've never believed, and I don't know anything about, sadly, I don't know anything about being a rock star, but I never liked them. I like biographies about musicians, so I always stayed away from it. And then I was researching a book of mine called Don't Skip Out on Me, and I was driving north of Tonopah. I don't know if you guys know, like by Belmont and Manhattan, and we were driving. Me and this buddy of mine were driving maybe 20 miles from there, and we came across this big kind of desert playa, and what looked like a statue of a black horse. And so we pull over and we get out and we start walking to the horse, and we can see it's alive, and it's old. It was an old Mustang, and it, you could see it had a little sway back, and it had scars all over its body, and the scars just let you know it's an old man. And as we got closer, we could see it was completely blind, and it just stopped me and my friend in our tracks. I don't think I'd ever seen anything in my life that hit me like that, which is the idea of making it through all those scars, just to end up alone in a desert, blind. When you think about horses, the two things they're most scared of is one, not having their friends around them, and number two, not being able to see what scares them. So we camped near the horse that night, and then we went back to get cell reception near Tonopah, and called the BLM and said, hey, and they said, oh man, there's a guy who'll come out for the horse. And we waited around, and then after that, we drove even farther out, and we came to this old mine, a huge operation at one point, but it was just a derelict mine. But and it was like all those kind of places. It was all shot up and abandoned cars, except it had a little assayer's office, a wooden assayer's office that no one had, for whatever reason, had shot up or burned down. And I was being real dramatic. I was touring a lot then, and a lot more then, and I was boozing a lot. And I told my buddy, I said, I think I'm gonna just get out here. I'm too thin-skinned to see stuff like the horse. I'm too thin-skinned for humanity. And my buddy, who I'd known for like 30 years, he literally doubled over laughing, because I made a real dramatic speech. My eyes got all watery. And he goes, where are you gonna plug in your record player, man? And then I was like, and he goes, and then you'll start hitchhiking to get back to Tonopah, and to call your wife, begging her to come get you or move in with you. And she's smart enough to have gotten over you by then. And then you'll have to get a job. To get her back, you'll have to get a job and a car, and it'll all start over, so you might as well not move out here. And so when I came home, I couldn't shake that horse. The last Richmond Fontaine record has a portrait of that horse by Greg Allen, the painter from Reno, who did a lot of my band's covers. He painted a picture of it, of the horse. And I started thinking about that in terms of being a musician, of being a journeyman musician, of why people still do art, why I was still writing and still being in a band, driving around a little van, doing gigs. And I thought the book would be too weird for normal people, but I didn't give up on it. And so I was just interested in the life of a journeyman musician, and I have to say, I always romanticized the lounge musicians, even though I know those were bad gigs. But I was never a good enough musician to be in a lounge band. Arguably now I am in a lounge band, so it's the life of a journeyman musician from Reno, because I grew up at the tail end of when casino musicians still made a lot of money. And I remember I played with a guy in high school, and his dad was a casino musician, and his buddy was a casino musician, and I hung out with him, and he had a showgirl girlfriend. He worked 4 hours a night. And I was like, you're the greatest guy of all time. You don't, that seems like heaven. And he was like, oh, no, man, you just got to play your own music. Don't play. You'll have to play Kenny Rogers for the rest of your life. So I'm going to just read a couple little sections. This is how a guy falls in love with music, or why a guy would risk his whole life chasing songs. At 14, Al was 6 feet 3 inches tall, his hair jet black and his eyes light blue. His face was dotted with acne, and he weighed 113 pounds. His body was his constant embarrassment. Just undressing in PE revealed to all the rivers of blue veins under his skin and the bones of a skeletal frame. 14 was also the year he experienced his first prolonged mental anguish over the death of his Uncle Vern. Within a week of hearing the news, he became paralyzed in a sort of panic fit that wouldn't abate. He couldn't sleep and had no appetite or energy. Vern had been not only his uncle, but his best friend and only confidant. His mother had refused to talk about her brother, so Al never told her or anyone how broken he was by the loss, or admitted the panic and sadness that followed his uncle's death. 14 was also the year his mother's part-time boyfriend, Herb Marks, stopped in front of the duplex in a white Pontiac Grand Prix. From the kitchen window, Al and his mother saw him pull up, and Al grabbed his coat and left. Inside the car was warm and had a white leather interior and clear plastic floor mats covering the white carpet. Herb, a bulky bald man with a wax mustache, owned 3 auto parts stores and smoked 2 cigarettes on the drive to Jonasquaga's Nugget to see Buck Owens and the Buckaroos. This was years before Buck was Hee-Haw Owens, but even so, the casino's smaller main floor lounge was full, and the band came to stage in sparkly blue nudie suits. Buck grinned his big, white, toothy smile and said witty things between songs. The Buckaroos played with a sort of controlled abandon, and Buck acted like he was the happiest man who'd ever lived on earth. Maybe it was because Al's mother and Vern had always had the country station on, or maybe it was because he had never been to a live music show before, but seeing Buck Owens that night became a marker for everything after. It wasn't the suits or the adulation that came from being on stage that attracted him, nor the idea of money or fame. It was that when they played, he disappeared. When they played, suddenly Al wasn't Al anymore. He was transported inside the noise and rhythm and melody and story. It was as though suddenly he understood that just by a song playing, he was able to vanish from himself. So I'm going to fast forward to when he turns 51. Al turned 51 in 1996. It was the year when alcohol began to catch him. He slurred where in the past he had never slurred. More often he vomited and he spent longer periods on the toilet. He also began to pass out. Twice at a bar called the Lost Highway, once in the back of the elbow room, and one morning he woke up at dawn with no recollection of why he was sitting on the dirt outside of Mountain Vista's mobile home park. Al mentioned what was happening to an old man named RJ who sat at Little Sam's each morning and drank Jameson's on ice. RJ was bald and thin and 5 feet 7 inches tall. For 40 years, he'd been married to a one-time showgirl who was 6'2" at her tallest. When the restaurant was slow, Al would sit beside him at the bar and drink coffee. "Well, I'm just telling you the truth, Al," RJ said. "Nothing good happens in a bar at night to a guy over 50. It's just a fact. So if you're going to drink out, drink during the day, because day drinking is old man drinking. And if you can't figure out how to do that financially or with your family, then don't drink. I'm telling you, man, be home by sunset with your door bolt locked and your slippers on. It's the only way." Al tried to follow the advice. He quit seeing bands and bar hopping, and he stopped playing drunken slots and eating late night meals at casinos. He tried to stay home. He bought a VCR and rented movies. He collected 1930s jazz records and Morricone soundtracks. And even though he had no one to write for, he obsessively worked on a series of folk ballads. The Oil Rig Fire, A Girl from New Orleans, The Tijuana Killings, The Ballad of Jaime Sanchez, Colleen, Where Are You Now, Polly OD'd Last Night, Mr. Luck and Mrs. Doom, The Cops at the El Cortez, The Motorcycle, Blue to Blackout, The Missing Girl, Pickpocket Pauline, The Ballad of Helen Casey, The Handicapper, No Sleep Lorna, The Fight at the Turf Club, The Kid They Found by the Tracks, The $15,000 Street, The Short Order Cook, The Rundown, She Grew Up on the Gulf of Texas, Billy and Lorraine, The House Robbers, Sitting in the Movies Alone, The Marauder, Makeshift Living Ain't No Living at All, A Burning Car on the Flats, The Beaten Outside the Ponderosa Casino, Gail the Grifter, The Back Room of the St. Francis Hotel, Cowboy Jim and the Narcoleptic. When he was done with those, 2 years had passed. He bought a harmonium and began writing story songs with slow, brooding melodies, the shortest being just under 9 minutes. The Killing of a Motel Maid, A Drink Before Work, Waking Up Outside of Bruno's, The Le Mans, Waiting for You to Get Off Work, I Hope You Don't Ever Have to See Me This Way, Nancy and the Pensacola Pimp, The Used Car Lot, Little Leon and Josie the Junkie, Blood on the Kitchen Floor, Let Me Sleep Until My Fight's Over, The Hold Up, Darkness Is the Only Friend I've Always Had, and The Ballad of Frank and Jerry Lee. So the band I'm in now, I write the songs for a middle-aged woman. And so I write middle-aged women's songs. And it's super fun. It's like, for a songwriter, it's like getting out of prison for myself. Because I could write all these different kinds of songs, like love songs, which I'm not very good at writing, as I told you earlier. So, but my singer's not as dark-minded as me. And she would take me aside sometimes and like grab my shoulder like an aunt would when you've done something, when you've maybe robbed your aunt's liquor cabinet and she catches you. That kind of, I'm gonna slap you around. She'll take me aside and she'll go, look, man, you gotta write me a love song where no one dies. And they just live happily ever after, or I'm seriously gonna lose my mind. And so this came off of one of the song titles. There's 230 song titles in that book, and this is one of the first songs I actually wrote off that list. Miss Doom was half living in her car, cleaning houses in St. Augustine, Florida. Mr. Luck had just gotten on a bus where he'd done 4 years. First crime, first bust. That's how his name stuck. Now Miss Doom is getting yelled at by her boss outside a mansion that overlooks the bay and the cross. And Mr. Luck is thinking who he could call just to stay a week till he can get himself back on his feet. Mr. Luck and Miss Doom, they never check out before noon, and their clothes are always thrown all over the room. Mr. Luck, he got off that bus next to the ocean in St. Augustine, Florida. And Miss Doom was just walking down the street. And they got to talking, and they swept each other off their feet. Mr. Luck and Miss Doom, she never falls off the world because it's him she's holding on to. And their clothes are always thrown all over the room, and he saves her from her self-inflicted ruin. And she holds their money, and she makes all the rules, and they wear out every mattress in every room, and they always get out before it falls through. Well, Mr. Luck and Miss Doom, Mr. Luck and Miss Doom, Mr. Luck and Miss Doom. Well, thank you. I don't know how much time I have left because I know there's a. So we have question answers in a little bit. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Well, I was gonna just play before the question answer. I got 3 Reno songs. I could play the very first song I wrote about Reno The first time I had to move back into my mom's basement, Reno song, and then my seriously psycho Reno song. So I don't know which, if anyone... Psycho! You want Psycho? All right. Well, I moved to Portland, Oregon to be in a band. I was a failed musician here. I couldn't get anything going, but I really liked it here. There's a certain side of Reno I just really liked, as you can see in my stuff. It's what I got an edge to me, I guess it's easy to say. And so I moved to Portland, and I really didn't like it there, and it was too big a city. And so my first two novels are about Reno because I was homesick, and I used to hang out at any place that made me feel like Reno. That's how I got addicted to betting horses at the horse track. And then I've read everything I could ever find by Nevada writer, and this is one by Walter Van Tilburg Clark called The City of Trembling Leaves that I just have never been able to finish. So I felt bad, and I told him in my mind, I said, I'm really sorry that I can't ever finish it. I've started 4 times or 3 times. I think you started 4 times. Last night we were talking about that, but I think I did 3 or 4. Anyway, but I did write this song called The City of Trembling Leaves. Yeah. So this is about being homesick in a really severe way and boozing. Well, I got off work, was waiting at the bus stop, when 2 guys in a black 2-door Ford sedan pulled up, and they asked me if I needed a ride. Well, I got in the back seat, but they were drinking tequila, so I told them they could just drop me off on 7th Street. They didn't have to go all the way downtown, and they just headed out, on the road. Oh, city of trembling leaves, city of trembling leaves. Well, there's no greater distance than from you to me. But 2 days later, we were someplace in Idaho, and the wind mixed with the snow made such a terrible sound. And it was then that I fell asleep, and it was there that I fell asleep. And when I woke an hour later, they were throwing me in the trunk. Oh, city of trembling leaves, city of trembling leaves. Well, there's no greater distance than from you to me. Our city of trembling leaves, our city of trembling leaves. Well, there's no greater distance than from you to me. I could hear the sound from the radio and smell exhaust fumes from the engine, and through a rust hole in the trunk I could see the snow blowing by. Oh, to be under sober skies where the air is cool and dry, to be at the gold and silver, my brother and I. Oh, city of trembling leaves, city of trembling leaves. Well, there's no greater distance than from you to me. All right, I think we're at the question. I don't want to ramble on too much. Yeah, that was not one of my biggest hits, as you know. I keep waiting for it. Maybe some weird Norwegian death metal band. That'll be their ballad. Because every death metal band needs at least one ballad.
Who wants to ask the first question?
What are the things you miss most about Reno?
It's interesting. I guess I just miss like, there's an edge to it that I miss, I guess, that's melancholy and nostalgic. The old parts of Reno, I always wanted to live kind of off California. So like last night, I just walked around that, just dreaming about all those old houses, the brick houses. That was the dream. I almost had that dream once in 2008 when it all fell apart, and it was cheap here again. But being a musician, it's really hard to get a loan, and so I had to. That's when I kind of broke up with moving back. Is like my wife's like, so you want to buy a house there? And she goes, why? And I go, because it's on this alley. I've always wanted to live on this alley. And she goes, so you want to live on it? So what are we going to do there? And I go, I have no idea. And she goes, have you thought about it in terms of anything but that alley? And I said, no. So I think there's just there's a melancholy nostalgia that I like. But obviously the weather, it's the most beautiful area in the world, man. The Sierras are right there in the desert. And,
I lived in a brick house in St. Lawrence. It was way too quiet over there. I think you like it.
I would like it.
Who wants to ask the next question?
Hi. Did you ever feel unmotivated, and how did you keep going when you were writing?
That's a good question, because the motivation's hard, especially when you're not very good at it. No, and I'm not being too self-deprecating, because it just took me a long time my band, we did 6 years where we never had more than like 40 people at our gigs. But we got along. We always were pals. We're still pals, surprisingly enough. I just really loved it. I only started playing music because I loved music so much. Like, you love records so much, you don't know how to get closer to them. Like, you can't hug them all night. You can't eat them. And I didn't know what to do, because I think I've always had a big edge on me. I think they were my best friends' records. I think the most consistent thing in my life were records. Like, Willie Nelson's Greatest Hits and Some That Will Be, I started listening to it at 7 years old. My mom had 5 records, and that was one of them, and that still brings me great comfort when my life falls apart. The Motel Life, I gave him that record because it's just comforting. So I didn't quit because I didn't know what else I wanted. I always thought that maybe if I didn't quit, I'd write one good tune. Like, you'd finally write a good tune. And just being around those kind of people, like musicians, is just heaven to me. So I just never quit. I'm really stubborn that way. And as far as writing, I just like the work ethic of it. The worst part of both of those things is failing at it, because then you have to try to trick your brain into keep going. Even when people say you're no good at it, you have to figure out ways to keep going. And I've been, I can delude myself, and I've worked really hard at protecting that side of me, because I don't have naturally I don't have confidence at all. But I love the work ethic of it. But it is hard. Some people can keep going, and some can't. Some are smarter and are about, get a job at UPS and are going to retire soon, and look at pictures of the boats they're going to buy instead of just, sitting in a van with a bunch of old guys.
Well, I think that kind of dovetails from this, but one thing I really loved about The Horse was the way in which you wrote us through Al's method for writing his music. The notebooks and the titles were a huge part of that. I just want to know, how much of those titles, I guess, maybe came out of your notebooks or the process that Al described?
Yeah, I think I said over 230 titles. No, I just wrote them all for this book. It was just, the most fun was just dreaming up the bands. I cut out 200 pages of bands he was in. Because it got in the way, but I loved it. I usually think of things in stories. Like, when I'm writing tunes, it's usually a story first. And then I think of what kind of music could go with that story, and that's why they're not that catchy. Usually, if I have a catchy song, it's usually the music came first. But usually it's just the idea, like the story of it, and then I start working on lyrics, and then I think of, man, what kind of music would fit with this? And now with the lines, like musically, it's really fun because there's certain things that she won't sing, she doesn't like singing about, and there's certain things she likes singing about. And so I kind of have some rules. So it's really fun. But yeah, I don't write titles first. I don't keep notebooks anymore. I used to write. When I got a computer is when my fiction did better because when you're writing in hand, you see how bad it is. And then with computer, you could take all the bad stuff and put it in the bad file. And then when I did that, I did the opposite with songs. With songs, I made myself write in ink in a notebook to make myself realize that it took me like 7 drafts to get the song to where it needed to be. So it's okay that it's not good right now because that last song that I wrote that I liked took me, anywhere from 3 to 15 versions. Like 20 pages would be just one song. And so that taught me. But now I seem to just write everything on computer. All right.
Yes. Have you ever written about the Truckee River?
In a song? Yeah, I got a song about the Truckee River. Really? All right. Is that okay? Do we have time? All right. This dovetails into this is the first song I wrote about Reno, kind of. So my uncle, I used to fish up past Mayberry, near kind of in between like Mayberry and Verdi-ish area, all the way from like 15 to 25. I'd hang out there, go swimming up there or whatever. And then I told a relative of mine that this is this area, and there was this old white barn back there, and he goes, my dad's brother died there. He got in a hunting accident at the same place I used to hang out all the time, which it was really interesting to think of this kid who I'm named after had died in this place that I hung out, and I had no idea. So I wrote this song, and this is the cowpunk side of me. So I wrote this in Reno. Jesus, let me think here. 32 years ago. So I apologize for. Two roommates go funning outside a bunkhouse in the fields alongside the Truckee River, and a kid trips and falls on his gun by a White House. Washoe County lays bleeding in a brown corduroy coat. 1968, it was blurred in a haze of disbelief. He was an 18-year-old kid. Favorite son, he was a favorite one, and by its deed the parents' marriage and religion came undone. He was a favorite, he was a favorite, he was a favorite one. By a White House, Washoe County lays bleeding in a brown corduroy coat. 1968, all blurred in a haze of disbelief. He's an 18-year-old kid.
I understand that you think about screenwriting while you're writing novels. I've heard you say that. So now there's a third film in production, right? Based on one of your books. How is this feature film experience different from the first?
I think of them in movies. Like that's how I write. I just think they're movies. I'd never think about them as screenplays because it's a totally different art form. I mean, movies have made my life a lot easier. I mean, just financially, they pay you really good, and I mean, it's brilliant that way. When you get involved with it, anything besides that, you have to be pretty savvy, and it sucks up a lot of time, and you're suddenly dealing with a bunch of people that have ideas about a story that you were tired of a couple of years back, and then there's those people that some of them are really nice and really smart, like the director. It would be generally really cool people that love, movies and books and music and art. I mean, they're amazing people. And then you have the financial guys that love movies too, but they're the ones sacrificing a lot of money. And so they have to put their thumbprint on it. And so a guy like me, I decided I'm not thick-skinned enough and savvy enough to navigate it, so I've always just taken the money and run. So you can't complain. You can't take the money and run and then complain. So I don't complain. But the latest one was the most severe, where the one thing about movie situations I've been in is they're really good bullshitters. They talk really well. Because it's a Ponzi scheme, really. You're juggling all these different things, and you're trying to get all these different parts to think this weird guy's story is a good idea to waste all this time and money on. So it's a lot of used cars salesmanship going on. And with this one, they really said, like, we really want you a part of it. And then as soon as I signed, they're like, we really don't want you a part of it. And it was the most severe case of that. Like, the best part was Lean on Pete. The director, Andrew Haig, was a really sweet, amazing guy. And this one, I just got pushed out. But that's fine. So I don't. They have more to lose on it than I do. So I'm just grateful. It's made my life a lot easier.
Well, I saw your name on IMDb as a co-writer.
No, I've moved up and I'm a producer, but not a co-writer. Yeah, and a producer means I have no idea what I did on it, but you get paid more, I guess, with it. So that 25-year-old drunk agent who's now got kids in college, she handles all that stuff, and she's like 3 times smarter than I'll ever be, and so she handles all that stuff for me.
Well, I'm glad to hear you.
Yeah, she's really. It's always smart to be around people that are smarter than you. That is, if they like you. Yeah.
Does somebody else have a question? Okay.
I really appreciate your perspective and experiences of women characters in your books. The Night Always Comes really spoke to me. How do you find your experience in writing about that kind of experience?
How do I was raised by a woman, and so, I think that dictated a lot of it. She was everything, and she also talked a lot, so she'd come home from work and probably way too much information, but she'd tell you about being sexually harassed, getting paid less. She struggled with mental health issues, so I think all that, I found much more comfort in women. My grandmother and my aunt were amazing, and there were always just kind of safer places. In Reno, my cousin was a big drinking buddy of mine for a long time. So the one question is, or the one thing that I learned is every woman character is my cousin, and so I make it like they're my friend. And there's nothing worse than reading a middle-aged man writing about a woman, and she, she's really beautiful and likes the kind of music he likes, and Anne's in love with a 23-year-old halfway sane woman would ever want to go out with a 6-year-old man, the only woman that would be from a 6-year-old man writing it, you know. So I learned that. I don't know, and I love writing songs for my singer. It's so fun to write, like, you know, beat up middle-aged women songs. So I don't know. I just hope somebody, when I screw up, I hope somebody tells me. And you know, my editor is a woman, and my agent's a woman, and my wife. They'll all like drown me in a pond if I screw up. So I got a lot of help. Yeah.
Well, much like your show, I don't want to stray, but we have to go on to the sign.
Okay, I think I'm Radical Cats has been nice enough, and then I'm gonna just go back there and sign.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys. Thanks.